Welcome to Data-Driven Decision Making with Key Performance Indicators. My name is Trevor and I am the School Nutrition Director at ABC School Division, where my team and I have built a strong school nutrition program. Today, we are excited to share how our school division uses Key Performance Indicators, or KPIs, to guide the decisions we make for our school nutrition programs. To get started, let's first discuss what data-driven decision-making means. This phrase refers to the process of collecting and analyzing data so it can be used to make decisions for school nutrition programs. The process of data-driven decision-making involves a number of steps. They include collecting appropriate and credible data, analyzing the data in a way that leads to meaningful results, sharing the data with relevant people on your team, communicating the results of the data to your key stakeholders, and using the data to make decisions that will increase program efficiency. Data-driven decision-making can help you with a number of important tasks in your school nutrition program. It can help you to identify gaps between your current and desired performance, track your progress towards goals, assess your program in an objective manner, help you to make sound and justifiable decisions, and prevent wasted time and effort. Overall, data-driven decision-making is more than just a process for program planning. It's also a mindset that should guide how you approach every step involved in running your school nutrition program. A data-driven approach will guide you to regularly ask why things are the way they are and to seek answers to those questions that are based in facts and evidence. This approach ensures that program decisions are made with the best information possible. With this idea in mind, let's go over some of the essential concepts of data-driven decision-making. First, a data-driven approach should be used in every step of the decision-making process. Data should be collected from a variety of sources to gain a full understanding of the topic of interest. Second, data-driven decision-making involves a commitment to continuous improvement. It is an ongoing process that should involve examining data over time because looking at only one point in time will not provide enough information to serve as the basis for a long-term critical decision. Last, communicating both the purpose and results of data-driven decisions to all stakeholders is critical to sustain your improvement efforts. The purpose is not to confirm preconceived beliefs, but instead to enhance transparency and allow for all ideas and results to come through. Now that you understand what data-driven decision-making is and how important it is to school nutrition programs, let's discuss a tool you can use to help you during the process. Key Performance Indicators, or KPIs, are measurements of the most critical aspects of a school nutrition program's performance. KPIs allow you to set standards for your school nutrition program, identify problem areas, and measure progress towards correcting these problems. KPIs can also be used to identify where resources should be invested to have the most positive impact. Overall, KPIs help you to evaluate the most critical aspects of your school nutrition program's performance so you can maximize your successes. The KPIs we will discuss today come from the Institute of Child Nutrition's resource titled Essential KPIs for School Nutrition Success. We have developed a user's guide based on this ICN resource that you can use to follow along in this video, which you can download from the VDOE website. Feel free to pause the video if you have not yet downloaded the participant's guide. There are a total of 12 KPIs that are grouped into three main categories: meal counts and participation, financial and inventory management, and productivity and labor. In this video, we will discuss 1 to 2 KPIs in each of these categories and examples of how ABC School Division used each KPI to create an action plan for their school nutrition program. Let's start with the meal counts and participation category. One KPI in this category is known as the meal equivalent, or MEQ. The meal equivalent is a measure that allows you to convert all meal services, such as breakfast, lunch, snacks and non-program sales, to the equivalent of 1 federally reimbursable student lunch. In school nutrition programs, a federally reimbursable student lunch is the standard unit of measurement most often used to gauge the effectiveness and efficiency of the program. Converting your food sale data into meal equivalents also lets you calculate 3 other KPIs: revenue per meal equivalent, cost per meal equivalent, and meals per labor hour. We will discuss these other KPIs later in this video. You should calculate your meal equivalents weekly, monthly, and annually. This gives you the most accurate picture possible of the number of meal equivalents served in your program and provides a standardized measurement for you to compare sales internally and externally. So, let's look at an example of how you might convert sales data into meal equivalents. Here is 1 month of food sales data for ABC School Division, broken down by grade level. The first step in converting sales data into meal equivalents is to identify the conversion factors for each type of meal served. Let's begin with breakfast. 3 breakfasts are considered to be equivalent to 2 school lunches, which means that 1 breakfast is considered to be equivalent to 2/3 of a school lunch. This makes the meal equivalent conversion factor for breakfasts 0.67. Now we'll multiply the number of breakfasts served by the conversion factor to get the amount of meal equivalents served. When we do this, we can see that 2,096 meal equivalents were served at elementary breakfast, 2,364 meal equivalents were served at middle school breakfast, and 619 meal equivalents were served at high school breakfast. Lunches do not need to be converted because they are the base measurement we are converting all other meals to. The numbers for lunches will therefore stay the same. Now let's move on to snacks. 3 after-school snacks are considered equivalent to 1 school lunch. This makes the meal equivalent conversion factor for snacks 0.33. Now we'll multiply the number of after-school snacks served by the conversion factor to get the amount of meal equivalents served. We can now see that 736 meal equivalents were served at elementary snack, 823 meal equivalents were served at middle school snack, and 0 meal equivalents were served at high school snack. The conversion factor for non-program food sales is different from the conversion factors for breakfasts and snacks. To convert non-program food sales into meal equivalents, you must use a formula that will change each year because it is based on the free lunch reimbursement rate and the USDA foods value. Let's take a look at the formula for converting non-program food sale data into meal equivalents. The formula involves dividing the total value of non-program food sales for the month by the sum of the free lunch reimbursement rate and the USDA foods value. These numbers can be found on the USDA Food and Nutrition Services website. The free lunch reimbursement rate for the 2018-2019 school year was $3.33 and the USDA Foods value was 23.5 cents. When we add these two numbers together, we get 3.565, which is the conversion factor for the 2018-2019 school year. Now that we have our conversion factor, we can translate non-program food sales into meal equivalents. To do this, we simply divide our total non-program food sales by the conversion factor for each grade level. Once we do this, we see that 252 meal equivalents were served at elementary school, 1,234 meal equivalents were served at middle school, and 2,244 meal equivalents were served at high school in the non-program food sales category. Now that we have converted breakfast, snack, and non-program food sales to school lunch meal equivalents, we can add them all together to find the total meal equivalents served for this month, which is 29,310. Now that you understand how to calculate meal equivalents, let's discuss the second KPI in the meal counts and participation category. Average daily participation or ADP. Average daily participation is the average number of reimbursable student meals served daily in a school nutrition program. Monitoring your program's average daily participation can help you forecast and determine your program's labor requirements and purchasing projections. This helps you minimize waste and control costs. Average daily participation can also be used to evaluate the popularity of menu options, assess productivity, gauge customer satisfaction, and identify participation goals for your program. Average daily participation can be calculated for school breakfast and lunch. To find your average daily participation, divide the number of student breakfasts or student lunches served during the month by the number of operating days in the month. Let's take a look at how to calculate average daily participation for breakfast and lunch by taking a look at the data for the month of March at ABC School Division. First, we need to find the number of meals served during this period for each grade level and meal type, which is shown here. Next, we will divide these meals by the number of operating days in the month to find the average daily participation for each grade level and meal type. At ABC School Division, we had 21 operating days during the month of March, so we will divide the total number of meals for each meal type by 21 to get our average daily participation. Once you have calculated the average daily participation, you can use that information to calculate another value called the average daily participation rate. The average daily participation rate is the ratio of students who eat the school meal compared to the average number of students attending the school. You can calculate an average daily participation rate for both breakfast and lunch. To do this, divide the breakfast or lunch average daily participation by the average daily attendance at the school. The average daily attendance consists of the average number of students attending school on any given day minus the number of students who do not have access to the meal service. Let's calculate the average daily participation rate for breakfast and lunch using the numbers from our previous average daily participation example. We have already calculated the average daily participation for breakfast and lunch at each grade level. Now we can divide each participation average by average daily attendance. Remember that the average daily attendance is the average number of students who attend the school minus any students who do not have access to the meal service. I have provided the average daily attendance numbers here. When we divide the average daily participation by the average daily attendance for elementary school breakfast, we find that the average daily participation rate for the month of March was 0.3505. When multiplied by 100 and rounded to a whole number, we get a rate of 35%. When we repeat this process for each meal type and grade level, we see that the average daily participation rate for elementary lunch was 75%. Likewise, the average daily participation rates for middle school were 35% at breakfast and 72% at lunch. Finally, the average daily participation rates for high school were 11% for breakfast and 48% for lunch. When you regularly calculate the ADP rate for each meal in your school nutrition program, you can track it over time to check for major changes in your program's participation rates. This is called internal benchmarking. You can also compare your ADP rates to industry standards, which, in this case, align with the gold standards that were outlined in the former USDA award program known as the Healthier US School Challenge. This process is called industry benchmarking. Comparing your program's data to industry standards can help you understand how your program is performing compared to national standards. The industry standards for each school type and meal type are listed here. Let's look at them alongside our calculated ADP rates. When we compare our ADP rates to the industry standards, we find that we are meeting the standards at elementary breakfast, elementary lunch, and middle school breakfast. However, our ADP rates for middle school lunch, high school breakfast, and high school lunch are below the industry standards. So what does it mean that some of our ADP rates are lower than the industry standards? It mainly tells us that our school nutrition program has an opportunity to grow our participation and increase the number of students who eat school meals. We can now use this information to develop a program goal of increasing participation in school meal programs. The industry benchmarking information will also serve as the supporting evidence to explain to our stakeholders why we need to make a change in our school nutrition program. We will talk about program goal setting and action plan development later in this module after we have discussed a few other KPIs. We will now discuss two KPIs from the second major KPI category, financial and inventory management. These two KPIs are revenue per meal equivalent and cost per meal equivalent. Let's start with revenue per meal equivalent. This KPI measures the income received for each meal equivalent served. This value should be considered together with the cost per meal equivalent, which measures the amount of money paid for each meal equivalent served. Balancing these two KPIs ensures that there are enough meal revenues to meal costs. By using these two KPIs, trends and directions for improvement can be identified so that the best financial decisions are made. To calculate revenue and cost per meal equivalent, you will need meal count data to calculate meal equivalents as well as your revenue and expenditure statement. This statement is usually prepared at the end of the month by the school nutrition director or the school nutrition office. Once you have all of your data ready and available, you can calculate revenue per meal equivalent and cost per meal equivalent. To do this, divide the revenue or cost by the total meal equivalent. Let's take a look at a sample calculation to determine revenue and cost per meal equivalent. We will work from the same example introduced at the beginning of this module, which showed a total of 29,310 meal equivalents. Here is the revenue data for ABC School Division's meal operations during the month of March, broken down by revenue source. We can use the division's revenue information to find revenue per meal equivalent by dividing total revenue by total meal equivalents. Remember, we calculated our meal equivalents earlier in this video and simply added them here. Now that we've found our revenue per meal equivalent for the month, we need to compare it to our cost per meal equivalent. Here is the cost, or expenditure, data for ABC School Division's meal operations during the month of March, broken down by cost source. We can use the division's expenditure information to find cost per meal equivalent by dividing the total expenditures by the total meal equivalents. Remember again that we calculated our meal equivalents earlier in this video and added them here. Now that we know the revenue per meal equivalents and cost per meal equivalents for the month of March, we can compare the two to evaluate the state of our school nutrition program, both at the school level and at the division level. We can see that at the division level, the school nutrition program made $3.76 for every meal equivalent served at a cost of $3.60 for every meal equivalent served. When we subtract the cost from the revenue per meal equivalent, we find that the program made a 16-cent profit per meal equivalent for the month of March. While it may seem like the division as a whole is in good shape because the total revenue per meal equivalent is greater than the cost per meal equivalent, it's important to look at information from each school level to identify school-specific needs. When we compare revenue and cost per meal equivalent at each school level, we find that cost per meal equivalent is greater than revenue per meal equivalent at the high schools. This may indicate that changes are needed to the program. We will use this comparison later in this module when we discuss program goal setting and action planning. The last KPI we will discuss in this module is meals per labor hour, which is housed under the productivity and labor category. Meals per labor hour is the main measure of productivity and production efficiency for school nutrition programs. It measures the number of meal equivalents produced during every hour of labor. This allows you to forecast your budget for labor and determine appropriate staffing. To calculate meals per labor hour, you will need to know the number of meal equivalents for the time period you are looking for. This could be weekly, monthly, annually, or any other time period you choose to examine. Once you have found your meal equivalents for the time period, you will need to find the total number of planned productive hours in that time period. Planned productive hours include the amount of labor planned by your school nutrition program for managers, kitchen staff, substitutes, and cashiers. Hours for sick, personal, or holiday leave are not included. Let's look at a sample calculation of meals per labor hour. Here are the planned productive hours for the month of March at ABC School Division. You can see that employees from each school are listed along with the number of hours each employee was scheduled to work during the month of March. The number of operating days, which was 21, is also included. At Elementary School A, we had one employee scheduled to work 8 hours per day on all 21 operating days for a total of 168 planned productive hours. At Elementary School B, 5 employees were scheduled to work 5 hours per day on all 21 operating days for a total of 525 total planned productive hours. When combined, we had a total of 693 planned productive hours at the elementary school level for the month of March. When we complete the same calculation for the middle schools, we see that middle school C had 168 planned productive hours and middle school D had 630 planned productive hours for a total of 798 planned productive hours at the middle school level. Moving on to high school E had 168 planned productive hours and high school F had 525 planned productive hours for a total of 693 planned productive hours at the high school level for the month of March. Now that we have the total planned productive hours for each school in the month of March, we can divide the total meal equivalents at each school by the planned productive hours to find the meals per labor hour. Remember that we are using the meal equivalents we calculated earlier in this video. When we complete the calculation, we find that the meals per labor hour were 14.5 at the elementary school level, 14.9 at the middle school level, and 10.7 at the high school level. Now that we know our meals per labor hour, we can conduct industry benchmarking. To do this, we will compare our meals per labor hour value at each school to the industry standard. An on-site production system like ours has an industry standard of 14 to 18 meals per labor hour, while a central kitchen can produce between 50 to 75 meals per labor hour. We will use this comparison later during the goal setting and action planning section of this module. We have now calculated 5 KPIs that we can use to evaluate our school nutrition program's performance. We can evaluate internal trends and compare our operation to industry standards in order to set goals for our program and develop action plans to achieve those goals. Let's start by looking back at average daily participation rate. We previously calculated the ADP rates for breakfast and lunch at our division's elementary, middle, and high schools and found that we met some industry standards, but missed others. In particular, our high school meal participation rates were low. From this information, we can see that our high school meal participation rate is an area for improvement, which we can turn into a goal for our school nutrition program. Our program goals related to ADP will be to increase the high school breakfast ADP to 20% by the end of the school year, and to increase the high school lunch ADP to 50% by the end of the next school year. These goals are considered to be SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. They are specific because they provide detail about what we want to change, which is the ADP rate. They are measurable because we can calculate the ADP rate at the beginning and end of the goal's time period to identify changes. They are achievable because we have the resources at ABC School Division needed to positively impact ADP rates. They are realistic because the percentage goals are a modest increase from current performance. And they are time-bound because we have identified the end of this school year and next school year as deadlines for reaching our goals. Setting goals in this way ensures that they are attainable and that you have a timeline for completing your goals. Once we set goals to increase high school ADP rates for breakfast and lunch, we had to figure out how we are going to reach our goals. We started by identifying factors that could influence meal participation, such as student acceptance, menu offerings, student-staff interactions, service efficiency, nutrition education, and the integration of our cafes into other school activities. At ABC School Division we decided to assess current menu items with student surveys and form a student menu committee that would taste test new menu items and inform our menu offerings. We also implemented grab-and-go breakfast at the high schools. At the end of the school year, we will measure our ADP rates again to see if we have achieved our goal of increasing program participation. Next, we'll consider our revenue and cost per meal equivalent. We previously found that our division-level revenue per meal equivalent was $3.76, while our division-level cost per meal equivalent was $3.60, resulting in a 16 cents per meal equivalent profit. We also found that the cost per meal equivalent was greater than the revenue per meal equivalent at the high school, resulting in a 25-cent loss per meal equivalent at the high school. We have previously seen that meal participation is low at the high school, which may explain why our revenues are lower than our meal costs. Since we are already planning to increase meal participation, we should plan to review our revenue and cost per meal equivalents at the end of the school year to see if increased participation has improved these values. We should also evaluate our program expenditures to see if there is anywhere in our program budget where we could spend less money. Last, we'll take another look at meals per labor hour. We previously identified that our meals per labor hour was 14.5 at the elementary school level, 14.9 at the middle school level, and 10.7 at the high school level. We can now compare these values to the industry standard for an on-site production system, which is 14 to 18 meals per labor hour. As you can see, our meals per labor hour are on the lower end of the industry standard at the elementary and middle school levels and below the standard at the high school level. We can therefore set a program goal to increase our meals per labor hour at all schools. Our SMART goal will be to gradually increase meals per labor hour at each school to 18 by the end of the school year. Now that we've set our meals per labor hour goal, we have to figure out how to accomplish it. There are two ways to raise the meals per labor hour value: increase meal participation or decrease the number of planned productive hours. First, let's take a look at how much we would need to reduce staff hours to achieve a meals per labor hour value of 18. To do this, we will divide the total meal equivalents by our desired meals per labor hour value. Remember that we previously calculated the meal equivalents for each school, which we will use in this calculation. At the elementary school level, we will divide our 10,071 meal equivalents by 18, our desired meals per labor hour value. When we do this, we see that we need 560 planned productive hours at the elementary school level to reach our goal of 18 meals per labor hour. For middle school, we will divide our 11,895 meal equivalents by our desired meals per labor hour value of 18 to find that we need 661 planned productive hours at the middle school level to reach our desired meals per labor hour. For high school, we will divide our 7,344 meal equivalents by our desired meals per labor hour value of 18 to find that we need 408 planned productive hours at the high school level to reach our desired meals per labor hour. Now that we have calculated the number of planned productive hours needed at each school level to reach a meals per labor hour value of 18, we need to compare the calculated hours to our current planned productive hours. Remember that we calculated this in our earlier example. When we compare the two, we see a need to reduce staff hours at all three school levels to reach our desired meals per labor hour value of 18. As an alternative to decreasing staff hours to increase meals per labor hour, we could increase participation rates, which would increase our meal equivalents value. Since we set a goal to increase ADP rates at high school breakfast and lunch, we can plan to check our meals per labor hour value throughout the next school year to determine if increasing ADP rates is enough to increase our meals per labor hour value. Additional considerations outside of reducing staff hours include the availability and type of facilities and equipment in the food production area, the number of serving lines available, the organization and workflow of the food production area. the timing or scheduling of lunch periods, training to increase employee skill and efficiency, and the complexity of menu preparation. All of these factors impact your staff's productivity and output, and, when adjusted appropriately, can increase your meals per labor hour value. As you have seen throughout this case study, key performance indicators are excellent tools to assist you with data-driven decision-making for your school nutrition program. By examining KPIs, comparing them internally, and comparing them to industry standards, you can see where your program is performing well and where your program needs additional attention and resources to improve. To review the rest of the KPIs we did not discuss in this module, we encourage you to review the workbook entitled Essential KPIs for School Nutrition Success by the Institute of Child Nutrition. You can also seek additional guidance from your assigned regional specialist. Finally, we encourage you to view the additional videos in the Team Nutrition Training series for in-depth overviews of other key topics related to school nutrition. Thank you for watching Data-Driven Decision Making with Key Performance Indicators.